I'm sorry, Zach, when you, at points, you turn away from your microphone, it seems, and you become difficult to hear.
Oh, my apologies. So there are, it looks like 14 public comments for the board to read, and then some with people who have requested to read their own. So Kim, can you actually start with people who have requested to read their own public comment?
Yes.
Thank you.
So the first one I will be unmuting is Roxanne Fitzpatrick, if she is still here. Hold on a second. Okay, Roxanne, you should be unmuted and you can deliver your public comment.
Good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. Well, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. This is a little weirder. I know you can't see me either. My thing's not working. But school boards are responsible to all people in their community and all the students. Every decision about every item must be made with the interests of everyone in mind. I've lived in the community for over 40 years, and we chose this area because of the outstanding schools. I've also been a realtor in the area for 28 years. All 4 of our children have graduated from Farmington Public Schools and have gone on to college. And now we have 3 grandchildren in the Farmington Public Schools. We and our children have had great experiences with our multicultural community, made and maintained many wonderful friendships over those years. So I'm kind of wondering what's happened to change that, because I'm seeing a lot of rumbling. I'm not a troublemaker. I've been involved in the community my whole 40 years I've been here. I was 20 years the president of the baseball and softball Little League, local PTA, president of the PTA council. I've served on numerous committees with the schools, closing a school, selling of properties, hiring a superintendent, and I serve in the Optimist Club also within Farmington Hills. At this point, I am concerned, upset, scared, and also worried about what's going on with our school board and our schools in our community, and I have been over the last 5 years. I have a new couple that's been referred to me to buy a house from they're coming from Grand Rapids. What can I say to them when all of this is going on with our schools? When they ask, is Farmington Public Schools a great place to bring your kids and to live in? It's a little difficult to say that we had a problem with the board and our former superintendent, Dr. Heisch. And now we've only had a superintendent here for about 17 months. And there's been dilemmas, it sounds like, with the school board again, which really bothers me. This is a great community, and I'm worried about the fact that if you don't have good schools, you're not going to have good property values either. So although we have a great community, I feel that Bob Herrera was the best person and still is the best person to be running as a superintendent for our schools. I was very encouraged to see that I got to be on one of the committees to help choose the assistant superintendent of diversity. Happy to see that was happening in our district. But I do feel that you've lost Dr. Herrera and also one of the most caring, intelligent women, Pam Green, which is our loss. I feel there's a division in our district, and I think that all board members really truly need to look in a mirror and say, am I truly acting like a school board member according to the definition? And are we working together? Remember why you ran for this position, for the children and not only your own special interests. I have a lot of people in the community who are very upset as I am about our children and grandchildren in the school system and the possible decline of our properties. We need to find where the problems lie and how to look for the overall solutions. This is our community, our children, and we will have to continue to monitor school board meetings and actions of our school board. We need to figure out a way to move forward and work as a team. One of the greatest strengths of our community is our diversity. We are where we are at the moment, so let's make sure to have a thorough process to make sure we vet any concerns so we don't end up here again. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go on to the next comment.
I'm sorry, I forgot to activate my timer, so I have it ready and waiting.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, the next public comment is from Joe O'Connor. Okay, Joe, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I'm Joe O'Connor. I have a daughter that's a freshman at Farmington High. I've spoken to most of the board before. I wanted to discuss the goings-on that have caused the resignation of Dr. Herrera and subsequently 2 board members to resign and the board to censure a board member for the behaviors of his actions. The tremendous damage to the district in terms of stability and reputation. It made all the news again for the wrong reasons last week. I too was contacted by people outside the district that said, what is going on with your district? Every time every few months I find something going on with the board, the superintendent, there's some kind of chaos going on. And in addition to that, as a taxpayer whose taxes help fund the school district, I'm resentful of the fact that we're in a situation where we had to come to a financial settlement with the superintendent with taxpayer dollars funding that. The cost, there will be a cost to a permanent new superintendent. That'll be taxpayer dollars paying. I don't know that there will or won't be some cost to appoint some new board members. So all that comes funded from the taxpayers, and we just passed the renewal of a bond that Dr. Herrera did a great job promoting. And Roxanne mentioned the property values. First things to go are the schools, and everything else follows. And again, if you're someone that's considering moving into a district with a young family, and you see what's going on in Farmington and Farmington Hills Public Schools, you'd have to think twice. So I do commend the board on their censure of this individual that caused all of these incidents. And but there will be no peace or progress as long as that individual is still on the board. So I'm publicly here to call for her to resign. And also I'm calling for the board to take up a motion for her to resign. I think for the board not to do that would be fiscally irresponsible, because mark my words, this is not the first incident, and this is not the last incident with this board member. And, to quote Maya Angelou, when somebody shows you who they are, you ought to believe them the first time. So there will be no peace until this is resolved with this board member. Thank you for your time.
Okay, the next comment is from Kelly Goldberg. Kelly, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good evening. I will be speaking on the departure of the superintendent and the censure of Angie Smith. This censure by her colleagues, who then cut and run, appears to be the result of collusion of several board members and not the board as a whole. At the meeting where this occurred, not every board member was aware of the plan to censure Ms. Smith, nor were they consulted prior to being presented with the resolution or document, which was read by the member who had recently failed to retain his seat. The censure appears to have been prepared with the assistance of the district's attorney, which is funded by us, the taxpayers. You are probably expecting a long expose on racism and the silencing of yet another passionate, outspoken Black woman, which would not be amiss. But there is another issue at play here. From his arrival in our district, Robert Herrera resisted appropriate board oversight, unlike his predecessors. He brushed off pointed board questions about return to learn plans. Crucially, he ignored increased warnings on the dangers and impact on the second wave of the COVID pandemic, which is now upon us. The superintendent failed to grasp the scope of this pandemic and disdained real-time input from teachers, students, and families. He created a communication framework which isolated him from vital information, and he complained when families in desperation reached out to board members. Appropriate acquisition of long-term IT and LMS infrastructure and training were delayed because of the futile hope of returning to face-to-face learning. Now, our community is a COVID hotspot. Over several board meetings this summer and into the fall, it was evident that FPS buildings lacked adequate equipment and cleaning staff to achieve safe learning environments, even if the pandemic levels permitted face-to-face learning. Now, after insisting on running his own show, Mr. Herrera has abandoned this district and crafted himself a parting gift of our tax dollars by claiming that he is intimidated by one board member. And this elected body shamelessly covered their poor judgment in hiring, championing, and enabling him by censuring the most honest board member. Ms. Smith has relentlessly stood up for the safety of all of our staff and all of our students. She has asked hard questions about equipment, staff levels, and building readiness, about flexibility, multiple learning options, and IT capacity. She has spoken out repeatedly in support of all students, of all abilities, and of all races. Her motto has always been yours for children, not only for Black students. You should lift the censure of Ms. Smith. Our students, staff, and families deserve her unthrottled, courageous leadership. I further urge you to read the board minutes of the public school districts of Novi and West Bloomfield to see what a true commitment to anti-racism can be. Your resolution to eradicate racism is laughable in the face of your recent actions. Thank you for your time.
The next comment is from Katie Hayes. Katie, you're unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. It has been an incredibly frustrating experience to take in news of our Superintendent, Dr. Robert Herrera's resignation, followed by the resignations of Board President Pam Green and Board Vice President Terry Johnson. The narrative created to explain these resignations is that they're the result of harassment and dysfunctional behavior instigated by two board members, specifically Ms. Angie Smith. It's appalling that the failure of district leadership to address racism in our district has been left out of this discussion. Our superintendent and board are yet again avoiding engaging in honest responses to accusations of racism and are deflecting responsibility to the Black women serving on our board. Since the murder of George Floyd by police on May 25th, Black-led organizations have built a powerful movement for Black lives, which has resulted in schools and organizations being held accountable for their claims of diversity, equity, and inclusion. FPS students, led by Anaya Stokes and Chelsea Hunter, were instrumental in elevating the lived experiences of Black students and teachers in Farmington schools, and doing important free labor to demonstrate ways in which our district, our teachers, and administrators cause harm through racist actions, beliefs, instruction, and decisions. Rather than believing and responding to their experiences, we still have yet to see from the superintendent or board any sincere acknowledgement of these problems or plans for addressing them. Ms. Angie Smith has been a vocal advocate for advancing racial justice within our schools. She's spoken not only from her experience as a Black mother, but also as a tireless advocate for many FPS families and community members who believe that this is the most important thing that our district should be focused on right now. She's not the rogue board member that she has been made out to be. She's an elected official who is fighting for us, her constituents, to assure the education, safety, and well-being of Black students and students of color. Ms. Smith has been ignored, silenced, voted against, and criticized to a point where anyone would become frustrated. Yet she has refused to be silenced so that our district can continue to ignore the racial injustice present in our schools. She's being pointed to as the problem rather than the individual giving voice to the race problem for which our FPS leaders refuse to take responsibility. Like so many other Black women in leadership roles, her behavior, being policed as divisive and unprofessional, is an intentional strategy to make the problems that she names disappear. This is part one of a two-part letter, and the second part will be read by Kelly Carpenter Crawford. Thank you very much.
Our next comment is from Kelly Carpenter Crawford. Kelly, you're
Hi, good
unmuted.
evening. Thank you. So in conclusion, the problem is not these two board members. It is the failure of this district's leadership to acknowledge and address racism. The future superintendent of FPS and members of this board must embrace their responsibility to address these issues if they are truly invested in students and families. This is hard work, but our community is more than ready for it. We are ready for education leadership that listens and understands our districts and superintendent successes must apply to all of our students before they can be considered successes. We need leaders who can unequivocally say that Black lives matter at school and who will recruit and retain administrators, teachers, counselors, school building staff, and paraprofessionals who bring these values to their daily work. Our kids and our community deserve this, and in fact, require it to survive and thrive in this world. This letter represents the voices of 67 community members who are taxpayers, voters, business owners, former and current students and families, former and current staff and administrators, faith leaders, and community members. Katie and Matt Hayes, Kelly, Evan, and Maddie Carpenter Crawford, Sunday Taylor, Amanda Thielen, Kelly, Marshall, Danielle, and Jordan Goldberg, Latanya Baldwin, Shrila Datta, Tara Shami, Tiffany Lee, Julie and Jeremy Frame, Sakita Lewis Johnson, Cheryl Shaw, Roxana and Brian Barnett, Danielle and Corey Ohm, James Taylor, Julie and Rob Wolkers, Francis O'Neill, Kaya Davidson, Jennifer Garland, Nellie and Shannon Kelly, Chelsea Hunter, James Kuhl, Sarah Hoopterp, Hallie Bard, Hans Bard, Hillary C. Bard, Bonnie and Randy Bard, Chelsea Lewis, Sarah Belize, Sarah Littleton, Keisha Shanti Wilson, Julia Hansen, Brenda Caulfield, Dr. Aaron Johnson, Mackenzie Hansen, Brooke Fernandez Steingold, Sean Steingold, Ruby Lewis, Nicole, Joseph, and Jonah Musial, Mary Beth Sikora, Emily Sikora Grimes, Maha Bayan, Naomi Khalil, Abba and Steve Deering, Reverend Dr. Patricia Coleman Burns, Cheryl Willette, Lester Thomas, Thomas Hull, Zena Kiles, Glenn and Mary Moore, and Brandy Cobb. Thank you very much.
That is all of the people that will be speaking in the meeting. You can proceed with reading the other public comments.
Thank you. Are there any volunteers to begin reading public comment? If not, I can definitely start, and if anyone would like to take over, they definitely can. Ms. Weems?
Sure. The first comment comes from David York. There is unfinished business left over from your last meeting. The three of you whose terms extend beyond this year either forgot or lacked the integrity, humility, and self-realization to resign along with your two former colleagues. Colleagues all in dysfunction and malfeasance, both through action and inaction. This is the second consecutive superintendent who will have left Farmington Public Schools due directly to gross misbehavior by board members based in part on overt racism. This board censured a board member for disgusting racist slander and harassment of the superintendent, racism that demonstrated both ignorance and stupidity, as the superintendent had been singled out as the best candidate in the state to turn around and save Benton Harbor School. Superintendent who had that task cut short by the current governor, who evidently preferred to close the high school to serve developers who had better plans for the lakeside property upon which the high school was located. For the censured board member, the district has no further interest in continuing to be disserved by remaining on the board. The only word of wisdom spoken at the last meeting was that the censure was long overdue. This was not the first racist attack against the Farmington superintendent that led the superintendent to leave the district. The censure and others should have occurred 2 years ago. As if that inaction was not bad enough, last July this board approved an unnamed proclamation endorsing a dishonest and fraudulent race-based attack on America, capitalism, democracy, family, and governance with the consent of the governed. Further, through both action and inaction, this board members have continued to fail to act as trustees. No better example was the censure motion itself, a very serious and impactful decision greatly impacting the district, yet one board member abused legalese to compose a convoluted motion and evidently made no effort to share the motion with other board members to review it and develop a consensus to secure a motion that deserved unanimous consent. The item was on the agenda, district legal representation was arranged, yet none of the board members could manage to email, talk, or text to each other to act as a responsible and unified board in the Farmington community's best interest. Worse, the circus is supposed to be modeling constructive behavior to the district students. Your behavior was a district-recognized disgrace 2 years ago. Taxpayers paid for MASB modified behavior modification sessions for this board. Instead of improved performance, the board went underground with their continued dysfunction. Fool us twice, shame on you. You have repeated your violation of trust of the community. Demonstrate now a minimal level of self-realization, accept responsibility for your misbehavior and damage to the district. Finish last week's business by resigning effective immediately. The district will be better served without you. The next comment is from Nomi and Corey Joyrich. We are long-term Farmington Hill residents with 2 teenage daughters. We were very dismayed when we watched the last school board meeting. The board acted undemocratically by making a quick decision about censoring a duly elected official without any opportunity for public comment and with no time for the board to do any due diligence. We were appalled witnessing an elected official being stripped of most of her power without any opportunity to defend herself. Since the meeting, we have tried unsuccessfully to see a copy of the censure resolution that we heard read, but we were told that it will not be available to see until after this meeting. We know that the only specific alleged misbehavior on the part of Ms. Smith was making accusatory and disparaging social media posts aimed against Dr. Herrera. However, we are aware that at least 2 board members have never seen any such posts and know nothing about them. We do not believe that any social media posts exist. We were told that there are other reasons why I voted to censure, and yet no board member has been willing to outline any other reason. Many of us voted for Ms. Smith specifically because she is outspoken and direct, and she has consistently done exactly what we elected her to do. We ask that you immediately rescind the censure resolution, at least until such time that there can be an investigation and the opportunity for public input. It has been disheartening to watch the board's actions to seemingly be motivated by personal animosity. Only Terry Weems has not acted out of personal interest. Therefore, we ask that you elect Terry Weems as the temporary new board president. The next comment is from Lisa Holmes. Almost 2 years ago, I stood in front of you in a packed boardroom when you voted to remove a member of your board as president. At that time, I made comments that in the past 20 years, I had been a member of the FBS community. I had never seen a board behave the way that you were at the time. Unfortunately, all of the comments that I said at that time still ring true. After the last board meeting, friends and family from across the state reached out and asked what was really happening here. I was embarrassed to say that FBS was the school district that I have supported for so long, that our board simply was crazy and had gone off the deep end. In this day and age where good superintendents are hard to find and many good administrators don't want to take on the position, we have now lost 2 in 18 months. When Dr. Heitch announced he was retiring, this board said good riddance. He has now gone on to assist 2 of our neighboring districts go through unexpected transition with glowing remarks from staff and community. In less than 18 months here, Dr. Herrera worked hard to turn this district back into the premier district that it once was. He made changes at the central office level, passed a much-needed bond, listened to the community, and listened to the board and when asked to deal with the pandemic. I'm quite sure that when he came here, he never thought that would be on his list of things to do, much less playing babysitter to a board that clearly needs it. The only thing you have managed to do in the last 2 years is to put FPS back on the bottom. 2 years ago, I said that a majority of this board has turned us into the laughingstock of Oakland County and quite likely the state. And at that point, I didn't even know who would want to work for this board. Unfortunately, here we are 2 years later in the exact same position or worse. This Board of Education forced out another superintendent and has made it into the news cycle once again for all the wrong reasons. Unfortunately, 2 years later, my closing remarks still ring true. We find ourselves looking for a new superintendent. At this point, I don't even know who would want to work for this board. The bullying comments, backhanded remarks, everyone that can see what is going on should run in the opposite direction. What's to say that you're not going to do the same thing to the next superintendent? This board is now 2 for 2. If I was a possible internal candidate, I'd be looking elsewhere. And for an out-of-state possibility, simply Google Farmington Public Schools. Our awards and achievements are not the first things that pop up. In a community where we start every month wearing purple to empower Farmington to stop bullying and increase a kinder community, you as leaders certainly haven't set a good example for the students. Think about what you're teaching our students, because if you're up there for them, then you should be setting a better example. My message to this board is that if you are one of the 3 members that will still be here in January, or if you are one of the 4 new ones that will be starting soon, you really take a look at what you are doing to this district as a whole and not just one particular part. You are setting the tone, and one that is not reflecting the positive aspects of the staff and students. The next comment comes from Amanda Thielen. Last week, I was shocked to watch the Board of Education meeting and hear the superintendent and 2 Board of Education members resign while placing all the blame on the shoulders of one Black woman. I've read through comments from many members of the community who seem to need no evidence to go along with the narrative that one woman was able to single-handedly cause the superintendent and 2 board members to quit on our kids and teachers in the middle of a global pandemic. In my house, we don't focus on the tone someone uses to express their frustration and outrage when things go wrong. Tone policing is rooted in racism and ableism. In my house, we look at actions and if they match up to the words that people say. 2 board members and a superintendent who claim to be there for kids up and quit during a pandemic. Those words and actions do not match. This Board of Education told us that this district couldn't possibly hold racist views and then largely voted to censure a Black woman for advocating for Black students and teachers. Those words and actions do not match up. The superintendent claimed that he doesn't treat Black kids and teachers unfairly, but at a rally organized by 2 FPS graduates in June, he and one of the Board of Education members who resigned stood by and laughed and talked throughout passionate statements made by students, graduates, parents, and teachers describing racism experienced in this district. Those words and actions do not match up. This superintendent said he doesn't treat Black kids and teachers differently, but repeatedly ignored calls by the community to say these 3 words: Black Lives Matter. This does not match up. Mrs. Smith attended the same rally and listened to the students and teachers. She said she'd fight for them and then advocated tirelessly to make sure their voices were heard. Those words and actions do match up. This public comment is as much to the community as it is to you as a board. It's time we look at the actions and not just the words. It's time the district takes allegations of racism seriously, puts actions behind the words in a proclamation that was passed months ago, and leads the community toward healing. I am hearing the words of the board and our leaders, but I'm not looking at your actions, and it's time they lined up. The next comment comes from Tara Shamey. The superintendent quit in the middle of a pandemic, followed by board president and vice president, each of whom suggested the reason for their departure was the behavior of 2 board members, Angie Smith and Terry Weems. Tonight, you will be reading public comments that mirror comments seen on Facebook, largely posted by the white community, saying maybe this will shut her up, and it's about time someone shut her up. The sentiment repeated itself in different forms. There was no evidence of Smith being a problem, but they grabbed onto the narrative. Many in our community appear intent on shutting up Mrs. Smith, but I am of the opinion that our community has shut up enough for all of us. I just have to make this smaller, sorry. The community shut up when a teacher called a young man the N-word. They shut up when a teacher forcibly removed a child from his seat demanding he pledge his allegiance. They shut up when a black teacher was fired publicly. They shut up every time a black child is screamed at by a white teacher. They definitely shut up when parents pleaded for help when their special needs students had been tormented at Kenbrook. They shut up when a little boy was locked in a room all alone at school. They shut up when a little boy came home from school with gouges in his arms left by his teacher. They shut up when an administrator called black cheerleaders strippers but loudly called for the protection of the white adult over the black children. They shut up when the past 2 superintendents hired unqualified people to do important jobs. And the community shut up when the vice president of the Board of Education carried a gun to a board meeting, and again when he said that Black Lives Matter was a terrorist organization. Yes, the community has shut up enough for all of us. Last week, the superintendent and 2 board members quit on us in the middle of a pandemic, so concerned for our kids and community, they quit. But not until ensuring that Bob Herrera would receive a large monetary settlement. They hired an emergency manager that did not want to answer to a Board of Education, and the results of the election did not go in their favor. So he quit, and so did they. He was just given over $100,000 to quit his job. Shame on the 5 members that allowed this to happen, 4 of whom will no longer be with us moving forward after promising this man a 6-figure bonus for work he was unable to do. They planned and executed a performance for the white community, counting on our racism to do the dirty work for them, and it worked. You are likely reading letters stating that Ms. Smith has caused all the problems of Farmington Public Schools. Each one is wrong. Ms. Smith has fed the children of Farmington before feeding herself. She shows up at school when something goes wrong and when things are going right. She showed up at the Black Lives Matter at school protests. She showed up when the kids asked for help. Unlike most of you, she always shows up. Yes, there are calls to shut Ms. Smith up, and each one is rooted in racism that plagues our community and schools. Ms. Smith, please do not shut up. Our community was shut up enough for all of us. Sincerely, Dr. Sheriff Shammy. Next is Denise Watkins. I am disappointed to learn of the resignation of the superintendent and 2 board members. Last week's meeting was a bit dramatic. It appears as if it came to a surprise to everyone except a select few. I hope going forward the board and the superintendent work more collaboratively to avoid these types of public embarrassments for the sake of our children, our school district, and our property values. It's pretty clear based on the events that transpired last week and based on research I've conducted on Dr. Herrera that the superintendent has no love for this district. He bounces from district to district with no intention of settling down and leaves threats of lawsuits in his wake. I get it. It's just a job for him. But for the board members who live here, who have kids in this district, what the heck is wrong with you? Where's your professionalism, grace, and concern for this district? Why can't you settle your issues internally and model behaviors you'd expect our children to emulate? Mr. Johnson, resigning 71 months into your 72-month term is nothing more than a publicity stunt. You speak of harassments, but weren't you the reason our previous superintendent left? Weren't you the reason a former board member resigned? Weren't you the person sending vile text messages to colleagues? Mrs. Green, I do not know much about you except that apparently you were aware of contentious relationships, yet you did nothing to stop it. It's obvious that you side with Mr. Johnson, the known bully of the group. Where was your leadership? Mrs. Smith, I hope that you learn from this that you must be cautious about what you say and how you say it. You get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. I am sincerely hoping that the Board of Education gets its act together for the sake of our children. Let's move away from these constant distractions. The next one comes from Natalie Trubowski. It looks like the board has been a hot mess ever since Pam Green took over. Hope this will be a lesson to the new board. Do not elect a former staff member with an axe to grind against the district, and definitely don't hand the district over to a brand new board member. Funny Mrs. Green talks about micromanaging. I recall one of the first things she did as a board member was take our kids out of classrooms on a test day in order to have them give her a tour of the boys' bathroom and count the rolls of toilet paper. What has been accomplished in the past 2 years? We've seen no data, we've seen no improvement, we have no strategy or vision. Now that the riff-raff are gone or silenced, sincerely hoping that the district can move forward with fresh new people dedicated to this district and interested in building rather than tearing it down. Rather than infighting, I'm really hoping the board develops plans to fix this district and creates less drama. Please present and future board members, no more drama. Return your focus to kids and real district priorities. The next one comes from Kelly Emmett. I'm a special education teacher with Farmington Public Schools, and I've spent close to 2 months in an in-person setting this school year. During that time, my colleagues and I were able to work with a limited number of students in a self-contained setting with complete success. The students were happy, healthy, and excited to be back in the classroom setting. I implore the board to consider each building and classroom individually and not district-wide. Our students with special needs require individualized learning plans in the least restrictive learning environment. They also require an individualized school and classroom setting decision by the board. The next one comes from Tracy White. I'm going to get right to it. Terry Weems for president. Had the board corrected its error 2 years ago, perhaps we wouldn't be in the position we are in now. She's the only person on the board who has been asking the right questions and who will hold the board and the superintendent accountable. She's also demonstrated tremendous poise in spite of all the chaos, dignity through mudslinging, and the competence this district needs. Perhaps a sharp, smart, type A personality ruffles some feathers, but we need someone who is strictly about business, not about politics, avoids distractions, keeps the district focused, and takes the high road. That's what we want for this district. The next comment comes from Onisha and Jeremy. I believe this is Onisha Martin and Jeremy Frame. The recent actions and resignations of Farmington Public Schools board members and Dr. Herrera are reflective of how this leadership has failed our students and community. First, FPS educators spent an entire trimester learning a new platform, planning, adjusting, and replanning because our leadership wouldn't take ownership and make the tough decisions. We had the opportunity to allow our educators to be the trailblazers that they are, but we overworked them in requiring them to plan for events that weren't going to happen, and our students were left in varied states of anxiety and stress because of it. The district speaks a great deal about the social emotional well-being of our staff and students, but it doesn't seem as if that was genuinely taken into consideration because we wouldn't be in this position if it was. Second, Mrs. Green, Mr. Johnson, and Dr. Herrera continued this trend in the scorched earth manner in which they decided to resign from their positions. Rather than accepting responsibility for the hostile environment that they led and addressing the concerns that the community and Mrs. Smith constantly brought up, they placed blame on Mrs. Smith. We have yet to hear any of them speak on the countless issues that the Black community of Farmington have literally protested about. But what we have heard is their cries of being victims and feelings of being harassed when all that has been asked of them is to do better. What is the ultimate form of gaslighting? This is the ultimate form of gaslighting and reinforces to the community the lack of care that this district has for its non-white students and employees. The irony that these members resign due to feeling misunderstood and harassed while not recognizing that this is the very feeling that our Black community is frustrated about should be lost on no one. But our students don't have the option of quitting and having a lofty position to fall back on. They still have to exist in this cruel world that these board members had no sincere care to change. The absolute privilege that it takes for one to cry about their own pain while denying that pain in another is astounding. The inability to see beyond oneself and do what's right for the whole should not be acceptable behaviors in district leadership, yet the frustration runs beyond those who resigned because the board as a whole took it a step further by censoring and publicly humiliating Mrs. Smith for speaking up and encouraging others to do the same. These actions should be considered negligent and abusive as it sends out the message that this will be the action taken against any person of color who does not fall in line. We hope that the new board members understand the weight of these issues and that they are ready to put in the work towards rebuilding the trust of the community. These duties, the safety, care, education, and love for all of our students and staff, should not be taken lightly. We are highly disappointed in the direction that the administration has allowed this district to go and pray for the sake of our students and community that we do not continue to follow this trend. Thank you for your time. Onisha Martin, FPS employee. Jeremy Frame, FPS employee. Thank you for demonstrating the name. Okay, the next one is Sarah Brandley. I would like to ask the board to not spend almost $36,000 on new boardroom supplies. I think this is an outrageous amount, almost $700 each on 12 new chairs. You have an action item tonight to allow the board to be remote under certain conditions until January of 2022. It is my understanding that this purchase was placed before the pandemic. Does this board spend this kind of money on chairs for our teachers and students? Please reconsider. If these items are absolutely necessary, find a better deal. Sincerely, a concerned Farmington Hills resident and mother of an FPS student. Julie Phillips. I watch my son work earnestly at home with his remote learning, all the while sacrificing all the memories he could be making at FHA Farmington High School as a freshman. I expect the same and more from our board. It is quite embarrassing to watch how two board members have acted childishly, irresponsibility, and destructively dismantling valuable, honest, hardworking board members and superintendents. Censorship at this point is a slap on the wrist. They should be recalled immediately. Julie Frame. If we view Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. or John Lewis or Rosa Parks as people to look up to, but attempt to silence and push out those voices who are carrying on their work, what does that really say? This district appears to have an unofficial policy of silencing or driving out courageous people who speak up and draw attention to the fact that not everyone feels valued and welcomed here. Please don't vote to pass a proclamation that claims Black Lives Matter in Farmington Public Schools and then turn around and blame the district's problems on people who bring attention to some real issues of racism. We have had several people step up to guide us in equity work and then leave this district for some reason. I think what happened to Angie Smith at the last board meeting highlights that reason. Either this district is willing to do the anti-racist work needed for it to be a place where everyone feels valued and has the opportunity for success, or we fight to keep status quo, allowing racism to continue, and just accept that we have an opportunity gap, also known as the achievement gap, in solidarity with those voices being silenced and pushed out. Some more to that one? No, I think that's it. The next one is Peggy Wilk. While I have no doubt that special education will be delayed in their return, no matter what we parents say, something needs to change. I know parents of many students are saying their kids are struggling. Add special needs into that, and the struggle is almost to the point of some parents not wanting to even bother having their student log on. The frustration with muting, unmuting, speaking up, answering fast enough before someone talks over them, it's frustrating to us as parents listening, and more so to our students. And special services, well, try as they may, it doesn't work. Sure, the district may manage to cover the butts in the service hours they are given, but they aren't effective being on a computer. On November 4th, the last day that special education also returned to remote learning, my daughter did great. It was a fun novelty being on the computer, waving to friends, being at home, etc. By November 5th, that novelty wore off, slouching in her chair, playing with the pen, clearly not engaged at all and frustrated with the technology. I don't know the answers, but I feel the district needs to look at other districts. What is working? What isn't? Collaborate and come up with a better plan to service these kids. This is not working for many of these students. And that ends public comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Weems, for reading through those. It is now time for us to move on to action items.